I live in a quiet, sun-drenched suburb that most people would call idyllic, in a house that looks like it was clipped from a magazine. For the last 5 years, I've been married to David, a man whose ambition was as sharp and impressive as his tailored suits. Our life, on the surface, was a carefully curated picture of success and happiness, but a strange smell in my morning coffee was about to burn that picture to the ground. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. The first time it happened, it was subtle. So subtle, in fact, that I dismissed it as a figment of my own overworked imagination. The Tuesday morning light was streaming into our pristine white kitchen, glinting off the stainless steel appliances that David had insisted were essential for resale value. He stood by the Nespresso machine, his back to me, the familiar sounds of grinding beans and frothing milk filling the air. He was a man of routines, and our morning coffee ritual was sacrosanct. He'd wake up at 5:30 a.m., go for a run, and have 2 mugs of perfectly crafted lattes waiting on the marble island by the time I came downstairs at 6:15 a.m. "Morning, beautiful," he said, turning around with a smile that, for the better part of a decade, had made my world spin. He slid my favorite ceramic mug, a pale blue one I'd bought on a trip to the coast, across the island. "Your fuel for the day." "Morning," I replied, my voice still thick with sleep. I wrapped my hands around the warm ceramic, raising it to my lips. That's when I caught it. A faint, almost imperceptible scent that didn't belong. It wasn't the rich, comforting aroma of roasted coffee beans. It was different. A slightly bitter, metallic undertone, like an old coin or a forgotten vitamin bottle. I paused, sniffing the steam again. It was gone as quickly as it came, lost in the overpowering scent of the espresso. "Everything okay?" David asked, watching me over the rim of his own mug. "Yeah, fine," I said, forcing a smile. "Just thought I smelled something weird for a second." I took a sip. The coffee tasted normal, perhaps a little more bitter than usual, but I chalked it up to a new blend of beans he might have bought. I was a marketing manager for a large firm downtown, and the past month had been a brutal marathon of deadlines and presentations. I was perpetually exhausted. My senses were probably just off. So, I drank the coffee, kissed my husband goodbye, and plunged into the chaos of my day, the strange smell forgotten by the time I hit the freeway. But it happened again the next day. And the day after that. Each morning, the same ritual. The same loving smile from David. The same pale blue mug. And the same fleeting, acrid scent that made the tiny hairs on my arms stand up. I tried to pinpoint it, to give it a name. It was chemical, but not like bleach or ammonia. It was medicinal, but not in a clean, antiseptic way. It was a smell that felt secretive, out of place in our perfect kitchen. On the 4th day, a Friday, I decided to say something again. "You know, it's funny," I started, trying to sound casual as I swirled the latte in my mug. "This coffee still smells a bit strange to me. Are these new pods?" David's smile didn't falter, but something in his eyes tightened for a fraction of a second. It was a micro-expression I had learned to read over the years, a tiny tell that revealed the whirring gears of his investment banker brain calculating a response. "No, same old arpeggio we always get," he said smoothly, taking a long sip from his mug. "Maybe the machine needs a deep clean. I'll run a descaling cycle on it this weekend." It was a plausible explanation. A perfectly reasonable answer that should have satisfied me. But it didn't. An unsettling feeling began to coil in my stomach. The problem wasn't the machine. He made his own coffee from the exact same machine, and is never seen to have the issue. The issue was my mug. My pale blue mug. Was I going crazy? Was stress finally making me paranoid? That weekend, David's sister, Emily, came to stay. Emily was a lot. A 28-year-old aspiring social media manager, she lived her life through an Instagram filter, documenting every brunch, every sunset, every sponsored post with a breathless, vocal-fried enthusiasm that grated on my nerves. She worshipped her brother, viewing him as the pinnacle of success, and treated me with a kind of patronizing sweetness that always felt disingenuous. She saw me not as Oma, but as an accessory to her brother's perfect life. "Oma, honey, you look exhausted," she'd said, air-kissing me as she breezed in, her Louis Vuitton luggage bumping against the doorframe. "You need to get on my new vitamin regimen. It's a total game-changer." On Sunday morning, the three of us were in the kitchen. David, ever the perfect host, was on coffee duty. I watched him like a hawk, my heart thumping a nervous rhythm against my ribs. I saw him prepare the 2 lattes, his movements fluid and practiced. He placed my blue mug on the counter, then his own gray one next to it. For a moment, he turned his back to grab the cinnamon. It was a brief window, no more than 5 seconds, but in that moment, I saw his hand hover over my mug, a slight, almost invisible tremor in his fingers. He sprinkled cinnamon on both, then turned to present them. "Coffee's ready," he announced cheerfully. The metallic smell hit me again, stronger this time. It clung to the steam rising from the blue mug. My stomach churned. I felt a wave of dizziness, which I quickly blamed on lack of sleep. Emily flounced into the kitchen, her phone already in her hand, probably composing a caption for a #SundayVibes post. "Ooh, yay, caffeine," she chirped, heading straight for the mugs. My mind raced. An idea, wild and reckless, sparked in the paranoid corners of my brain. It was a desperate, Hail Mary pass of an idea. Before I could second-guess myself, I acted. As Emily reached for David's gray mug, I stepped in front of her, picking up both my blue mug and David's gray one. "Here, Em, you take this one," I said, pushing the blue mug, my mug, into her hands with a bright, fake smile. "I know you love a bit of extra froth, and this one looks perfect." Emily beamed, oblivious. "Ah, thanks, Oma. You're the best." I then turned to David, handing him his own gray mug. I held my breath, watching his face. His smile remained plastered in place, but I saw it again, that flicker in his eyes. A flash of something unreadable. Panic? Annoyance? It was there and then it was gone. He took a sip, his eyes never leaving mine. I, on the other hand, picked up the mug Emily had been about to take, which was identical to David's. I lifted it, my hands trembling slightly. I inhaled deeply. Nothing. Just the pure, unadulterated, beautiful smell of coffee. There was no metallic bitterness. No chemical warning bell. It was just coffee. My blood ran cold. The air in the kitchen grew thick with an unspoken tension that only I seemed to feel. David and I stood there, locked in a silent duel over our coffee mugs, while Emily remained blissfully unaware, snapping a picture of the latte art for her Instagram story. "The best lattes are made by my big bro," she typed, her thumbs flying across the screen. I took a tentative sip from the gray mug. It was perfect. Rich, smooth, with a hint of cinnamon, exactly how a latte should taste. There was no bitter aftertaste, no strange chemical tang that I had been forcing myself to ignore for the past week. It was just clean. My gaze drifted to David. He was leaning against the counter, sipping his own coffee with a forced casualness, but he couldn't hide the rigidity in his shoulders or the way his eyes kept darting towards the pale blue mug in Emily's hands. Emily, having finished her social media duties, finally took a large gulp of her coffee. Her reaction was instantaneous and dramatic. Her perfectly made-up face contorted in disgust. What is this?" she sputtered, slamming the mug down on the island. A bit of coffee sloshed over the side, a brown stain on the white marble. "David, this is disgusting. It tastes like you brewed it with old batteries." The accusation hung in the air, sharp and undeniable. My heart hammered against my ribs. Old batteries. That was it. That was the metallic, chemical taste I couldn't place. It wasn't my imagination. It was real. David rushed to her side, his face a mask of concern. What are you talking about? It's the same coffee I always make. No, it's not. Emily insisted, wiping her tongue with a napkin. It's vile. Seriously, taste it. She pushed the mug towards him. I watched, frozen, as David was cornered. He couldn't refuse to taste it without raising suspicion, but the look of sheer panic that flashed across his face was all the confirmation I needed. He was trapped. He picked up the mug, his hand shaking almost imperceptibly. He raised it to his lips, but he didn't drink. He just pretended to, barely touching the foam with his tongue. I don't taste anything, he lied, his voice a little too high-pitched. It tastes fine to me. Maybe you're just coming down with something. I'm not coming down with something. Emily whined, her voice rising. My taste buds aren't broken. Oma, you try it. Tell him I'm not crazy. She turned to me, her eyes pleading. The spotlight was now on me. David's gaze snapped to mine, and it was no longer charming or loving. It was a warning. A cold, hard threat that screamed, "Don't you dare." My mind was a whirlwind of fear and adrenaline. For a week, this man, my husband, had been serving me something foul, something that smelled of poison and deceit. And now, he was daring me to expose him. My survival instincts screamed at me to play dumb, to pretend everything was fine. But another part of me, a part that had been silenced and sedated for too long, was roaring to life. I walked over to the island and picked up the blue mug. I looked at David, holding his gaze as I lifted it to my nose. The metallic smell was undeniable now that I knew what to look for. It was acrid and wrong. I then looked at Emily's disgusted face, and then back at my husband's terrified one. You know, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. I think you might be right, Em. It does smell a little off. I didn't taste it. I didn't need to. I placed the mug back on the counter, my hand protectively covering my stomach. David's face paled. He had been so sure I would back him up, that I would dismiss his sister's complaint as I had dismissed my own senses. My validation of Emily's suspicion was a betrayal he hadn't anticipated. You're both being ridiculous, he scoffed, trying to regain control. It's just coffee. I'm going to go get ready. He turned and stalked out of the kitchen, his retreat a clear admission of guilt. The moment he was gone, Emily launched into a tirade. Can you believe him? Calling me ridiculous. My palate is extremely refined, you know. I can tell the difference between Himalayan pink salt and regular sea salt. I wasn't listening. My mind was racing, trying to process the horrifying reality of the situation. David had been poisoning me. The thought was so monstrous, so outlandish, that it barely felt real. Why? For how long? What was in the coffee? My blood ran cold as I thought about the past week, the persistent, dull headaches I'd been having, the wave of fatigue that seemed to hit me every afternoon, the slight nausea I had attributed to stress. I had been slowly, methodically, being fed something harmful by the one person who had vowed to protect me. I'm just going to dump this out, Emily said, picking up the blue mug and heading for the sink. No. The word ripped out of my throat, sharp and frantic. Emily froze, startled by my outburst. Don't, I said, my voice softer but firm. Just, leave it. I'll clean it up later. I needed that coffee. It was my only piece of evidence in a crime I was just beginning to uncover. I needed to know what was in it. My background wasn't in medicine, but I was a marketing manager for a large pharmaceutical company. I had friends in the labs. I knew people who could run tests, people who owed me favors. As Emily chattered on about her brother's sudden grumpiness, I carefully took a small, sterile travel container from my purse, one I usually used for shampoo, and, under the pretense of cleaning up the spill, I poured a small sample of the contaminated coffee into it. I sealed it tightly and slipped it into my pocket. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely function. Later that day, after Emily had left and David was holed up in his office, still radiating a cold fury, I called my best friend, Chloe. Chloe was a high school chemistry teacher, a grounding force in my life, and the most pragmatic person I knew. Oma? You sound awful. What's wrong? She asked, her voice instantly laced with concern. I couldn't bring myself to say the words out loud. They were too ugly, too terrifying. Can you meet me? I whispered, my voice cracking. I need your help. And I need you to not think I'm crazy. We met at a quiet park halfway between our houses. I handed her the small container of coffee, my hand trembling. I need you to test this, I said, my voice barely audible. I need to know what's in it. And I need you to not ask any questions until you have the results. Chloe looked from the container to my pale, terrified face. She didn't press for details. She just saw the raw fear in my eyes and nodded. I have a friend at the university lab, she said, her voice firm and reassuring. He owes me one. I'll get this run first thing in the morning. Oma, be careful. As I drove home, the sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant strokes of orange and purple. It was a beautiful sight, but I felt no warmth. The perfect facade of my life had been shattered, and I was staring into a dark, terrifying abyss. My husband, my partner, the man I loved, was trying to harm me. And I was going to find out why. The suspicion had taken root. Now, the investigation would begin. The next 24 hours were the longest of my life. I went through the motions of a normal Monday, but my mind was a fractured, chaotic mess. At home, I moved like a ghost, avoiding David at all costs. I feigned a migraine, locking myself in the guest bedroom, telling him I needed absolute quiet. It was the only way I could create a safe space, a small pocket of the house that didn't feel contaminated by his presence. He seemed relieved by my absence, making no effort to check on me. The loving, concerned husband was gone, replaced by a cold, distant stranger. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart leaped into my throat, hoping it was Chloe with news. I spent hours online, my fingers flying across the keyboard, searching for anything that could explain the inexplicable. Odorless, tasteless poisons. Slow-acting toxins. Heavy metal poisoning symptoms. The search results were a horror show of medical jargon and terrifying possibilities: arsenic, thallium, antifreeze. I read about women who had been slowly poisoned by their partners for insurance money, for a new lover, for reasons so mundane they were bone-chilling. My headaches, my fatigue, my nausea, they were all listed as common symptoms. I wasn't just stressed. I was being systematically unwell. Finally, on Tuesday afternoon, while I was pretending to be in a virtual meeting, Chloe's name flashed across my phone screen. I ducked into the walk-in closet, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs, and answered. I have the results, Chloe said, her voice low and grave. There was no preamble, no small talk. Just the cold, hard weight of the truth. Oma, are you sitting down? Are you somewhere safe? I'm in my closet, I whispered, sinking onto a pile of laundry. Just tell me. I heard her take a deep breath on the other end of the line. The preliminary screen came back with a high concentration of ethylene glycol. The name meant nothing to me. It was just a jumble of scientific syllables. Ethylene glycol? What is that? It's the primary component in antifreeze, Chloe said, and the world tilted on its axis. Antifreeze. My husband was putting antifreeze in my coffee. The cleaning fluid from our garage, the bright green liquid David used for our cars. The metallic smell, the bitter taste, it all clicked into place with a horrifying, sickening clarity. The levels aren't immediately lethal, Chloe continued, her teacher voice kicking in as she explained the toxicology report. Not in a single dose. But this is a cumulative poison. Small, repeated doses over time. It causes kidney failure. A slow, painful, and often misdiagnosed decline. It would look like a sudden, tragic illness. I felt the air leave my lungs. My hand flew to my stomach. This wasn't a warning. This wasn't an act of petty cruelty. This was a plan. A cold, calculated, and patient murder plot. David wasn't trying to hurt me, he was trying to erase me. He was trying to make my death look like a tragedy, a medical mystery that would leave him a grieving, heartbroken widower. Why? The word was a choked, desperate whisper. Why would he do this? That's what you need to find out, Chloe said, her voice hardening with a protective fury. But first things first, you cannot stay in that house. You need to get out of there, right now. Pack a bag, come to my place. And you need to go to the doctor. We need to know what damage has been done. She was right. The shock was beginning to recede, replaced by a cold, clear-headed terror. I was in a house with a man who was actively trying to kill me. Every glass of water, every meal, every moment I was under his roof was a potential threat. I hung up with Chloe and moved on autopilot. My hands, which had been trembling, were now steady. The fear was still there, a cold knot in my stomach, but it was being overshadowed by a new, powerful emotion, rage. A white-hot, righteous anger that burned away the fog of confusion. I packed a small overnight bag with essentials, my movements swift and silent. I crept through my own home like a burglar, my ears straining for any sound of David. He was on a conference call in his office, his voice a low, professional murmur seeping from under the door. The sound of his calm, ordinary voice discussing stock portfolios while he was slowly poisoning me made my blood boil. I slipped out the back door, got into my car, and drove away from my beautiful, magazine-perfect house without a single look back. The first stop was my doctor's office. I called ahead, my voice strained with a desperate urgency, and convinced the nurse to squeeze me in for an emergency appointment. In the sterile examination room, I broke down. The whole sordid, unbelievable story came pouring out of me, the coffee, the smell, Emily's reaction, the lab results. Dr. Evans, a kind, middle-aged woman who had been my physician for years, listened with a look of growing horror. She immediately ordered a full blood panel and a kidney function test. "We'll have the results back by tomorrow afternoon," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "Oma, I want you to go to the police." "I can't," I said, shaking my head. "Not yet. A preliminary lab report on a coffee sample, he'll deny it. He'll say I'm hysterical, that I'm making it up. David is charming and convincing. He'll twist it, turn it around on me. I need more than a suspicion. I need proof. I need to know why." Dr. Evans looked at me, her expression a mixture of concern and understanding. "Then you need to be incredibly careful. Do not contact him. Do not let him know that you know. Stay with a friend. You are in danger." I left the doctor's office and drove straight to Chloe's small, cozy apartment. The moment she opened the door and saw my face, she wrapped me in a hug. I collapsed into her arms, the tears I had been holding back finally streaming down my face. I cried for the life I thought I had, for the man I thought I loved, and for the terrifying, unknown future that lay ahead. That night, tucked into the safety of Chloe's guest bed, sleep was impossible. My mind was a relentless slideshow of memories, each one now tainted by the horrifying truth. Every kindness from David, every thoughtful gesture, was now suspect. Was he lacing my food? My water? How long had this been going on? Had I been slowly getting sick for months, attributing the symptoms to work and stress? The rage returned, hotter and more focused than before. He wasn't going to get away with this. He wasn't going to erase me and play the victim. I was not a problem to be solved, a loose end to be tied up. I was a person, and I was going to fight back. The pharmacist's daughter in me, the marketing manager who built entire campaigns on strategy and execution, was waking up. He had made a critical error. He had underestimated me. He thought I was weak, oblivious, and easy to dispose of. He was about to find out just how wrong he was. The unseen poison had been revealed. Now, it was time to uncover the unseen motive. The next morning, I woke up with a chilling clarity. The fear and shock had crystallized into a diamond-hard resolve. Crying was over. Hiding was a temporary solution. It was time to act. Chloe had already left for work, leaving a note on the kitchen table: "Coffee is safe. Bagels are in the fridge. We will burn him to the ground. Red Heart C." Her unwavering support was the bedrock I needed to stand on. My first call was to Dr. Evans' office. The results were in. "Your kidney function is slightly elevated, Oma," she said, her voice cautious. "Creatinine levels are higher than they should be for a woman your age. It's not at a critical stage, but it's indicative of early-stage renal stress. It's consistent with low-level exposure to a nephrotoxin, like ethylene glycol. The good news is, now that you're away from the source, the damage should be reversible." Relief washed over me, so potent it made me dizzy. He hadn't succeeded. He hadn't broken my body beyond repair. But the confirmation that the poison was inside me, that it had already started its insidious work, solidified my anger into something cold and sharp. This wasn't just an attempt, it was assault. My next step was to understand the why. A man like David, a meticulous financial advisor who calculated every risk, wouldn't try to murder his wife without a powerful motive. It had to be one of two things: money or another woman. Or, most likely, both. I started with the money. From the safety of Chloe's apartment, I logged into our joint bank accounts. Everything on the surface looked normal: mortgage payments, utility bills, credit card statements filled with charges for expensive dinners and Emily's shopping sprees, which David always covered. But I knew David. He was a master of hiding things in plain sight. I started digging deeper, opening up individual credit card statements, cross-referencing dates and amounts. It was tedious, painstaking work. Hours went by. My eyes burned from staring at the screen, but I kept going, fueled by a relentless, cold fury. And then I found it. A recurring monthly payment, listed under a generic corporate services code, for a storage unit. It was a significant amount, nearly $500 a month. That was a lot for storing a few old boxes. We didn't have a storage unit. I called the company, pretending to be David's assistant, and confirmed the location. It was in an industrial park on the other side of town, a place I had never been to. Then, I turned my attention to our life insurance policies. We had taken them out a few years ago, a standard, responsible thing for a married couple to do. I logged into my own policy first. It was exactly as I remembered it, a $1 million policy with David as the sole beneficiary. My stomach clenched. Then, I tried to access his. Access denied. He had changed the password. That was all the confirmation I needed. He had a policy, and I was almost certain the beneficiary was not me. He was planning to cash in on my tragic illness and walk away a millionaire. The money motive was clear, but it felt incomplete. David loved luxury, but he wasn't desperate. His job was lucrative. This level of monstrous betrayal had to be fueled by something more personal. It had to be about another woman. My first thought was to check his phone records, but that was a dead end without access to his account. So I turned to the next best thing: social media. Specifically, Emily's. His sister was a chronic oversharer, her life a meticulously curated feed of social events and tagged photos. If David was seeing someone, Emily would know. She would have met her, probably even posted a selfie with her, oblivious to the implications. I scrolled through months of Emily's Instagram feed, my eyes scanning every group photo, every party, every tagged location. It was a dizzying parade of fake smiles and sponsored content. And then I saw her. A woman with striking red hair and a shark-like smile, appearing again and again in Emily's photos. Her name was Isabella. She was tagged in photos from a charity gala 3 months ago, a weekend trip to a vineyard 2 months ago, and a brunch just last week. In every photo, she was standing close to David. Too close. In one, her hand was resting casually on his arm. In another, they were laughing together, their heads tilted towards each other in a way that screamed intimacy. I clicked on Isabella's profile. It was public. She was a wealth manager at a rival firm to David's. Her feed was a showcase of ambition and extravagance, photos in private jets, on yachts, wearing designer clothes. She was David's female equivalent, a perfect match for his ruthless ambition. I scrolled through her photos, my heart a leaden weight in my chest. And then I saw it. A photo from 6 weeks ago. Isabella, standing on a balcony overlooking a city skyline I didn't recognize, was holding a glass of champagne. The caption read, "Celebrating our future. Can't wait to call this place home." And in the reflection of the balcony's glass door, clear as day, was the man taking the picture, David. The pieces of the puzzle slammed together. The storage unit wasn't for boxes, it was for the life he was building with her. He was slowly moving his valuable possessions, preparing to empty the house after I was gone. The insurance money would be the seed capital for their new life together, in a new city, far away from his past. And Emily. Emily was complicit. She had to be. She was the one who introduced them, who included Isabella in their social circle, who normalized her presence. She was smiling in all those pictures, watching her brother and his mistress together. The memory of her whining about the coffee, her dramatic disgust, took on a new, sinister light. Was her reaction genuine? Or was it a performance? Did she know what David was doing? Given her adoration for her brother and her thinly veiled disdain for me, the answer was a bitter pill to swallow. She was, at best, a willing accessory. I sat back, the screen of my laptop illuminating the dark room. I had it. The money. The other woman. The accomplice. I had the whole sordid web. The police would have enough to start an investigation now. I could hand it all over to them, let the justice system do its work. But as I sat there, a different thought began to form. A cold, calculating thought that mirrored my husband's own methodical planning. A police investigation would be long and messy. David and Isabella were smart, wealthy, and well-connected. They would hire the best lawyers. They would twist the narrative, paint me as a scorned, unstable wife. They might even get away with it. No. That wasn't enough. They didn't just try to end my marriage. They tried to end my life. They deserved more than a legal battle. They deserved to be exposed. To be humiliated. To have their perfect, curated lives come crashing down around them in the most public and spectacular way possible. David and I had our 6th wedding anniversary in 2 weeks. He had already booked a private room at our favorite upscale restaurant, a grand gesture no doubt intended to be one of the final chapters in his loving husband narrative before his wife's tragic decline. It was the perfect stage. The perfect opportunity. He had written the beginning of this story. But I would be the one to write the end. The web of truth was woven. Now, it was time to set the trap. The plan began to form in the quiet hum of Chloe's apartment, a blueprint for revenge drawn with ink of ice and fury. For 2 weeks, I lived a double life. To the outside world, I was a woman taking a much-needed break. I told my boss I had a family emergency and needed to work remotely for a while, a request he granted without question. I emailed David a carefully crafted lie, telling him I was staying with my mother out of state, needing some space to deal with my overwhelming stress. I wrote that I was sorry for being distant and that I would be back in time for our anniversary dinner, which I was so looking forward to. His reply was sickeningly sweet. "Of course, my love. Take all the time you need. Your health is what's most important. I'll be counting the minutes until you're back in my arms." The hypocrisy was so thick I could taste it. Every day was a meticulous exercise in strategy and preparation. With Chloe as my loyal co-conspirator, we began to assemble the pieces of our trap. My first move was to secure irrefutable proof. The lab report from the coffee was a good start, but David's lawyers could argue I had contaminated it myself. I needed something more. I needed to catch him in the act. I hired a private investigator, a grizzled ex-cop Chloe knew through a friend. He was expensive, but worth every penny. I had him place a micro camera in the kitchen of my own home. I gave him the spare key I kept hidden under a loose stone in the garden, a secret only I knew. The PI, a man named Frank, was a professional. He installed the camera in less than 20 minutes, hiding it in the smoke detector directly above the coffee machine. It had a perfect, bird's-eye view of the counter. The footage started rolling in. For the first few days, it was just David, living his bachelor life, ordering takeout, leaving his socks on the floor. But on the third morning, I saw it. I watched on my laptop, my breath caught in my throat, as David went through the morning coffee ritual. He made one mug. He reached under the sink, to a spot hidden behind the cleaning supplies. He pulled out a small, unlabeled bottle of clear liquid. He carefully, precisely, added a few drops to the coffee. Then he took the bottle and, to my horror, he didn't put it back under the sink. He took it to the garage and topped it off from the large container of antifreeze. He was refilling his weapon. He then returned to the kitchen, swirled the mug, and then, realizing I wasn't there to drink it, he poured the entire contents down the sink. He was practicing. He was keeping his routine sharp for my return. The video was crystal clear, his actions undeniable. I saved the file to 3 separate hard drives. That was checkmate, piece number 1. Next, I focused on the money. I used a portion of my own savings to hire a forensic accountant. I gave her the information about the storage unit and the recurring payments. It took her less than a week to uncover the truth. David had been siphoning money from our joint investments for over a year, moving it into an offshore account under a shell corporation. The account was in the Cayman Islands. And the co-signatory on the account? Isabella. The forensic accountant prepared a detailed report, complete with account numbers, transfer dates, and a paper trail that led directly from our shared finances to their secret love nest fund. That was checkmate, piece number 2. While the PI and the accountant did their work, I focused on myself. I followed Dr. Evans' instructions to the letter, drinking gallons of water, eating clean, and taking the prescribed supplements to support my kidneys. The physical poison was leaving my system, but the emotional poison remained. I channeled it. I let it fuel me. I rehearsed what I would say, what I would do, over and over again in my mind. I would not be a victim. I would be the architect of his downfall. The final piece of the plan involved Emily. I needed to ensure she would be at the anniversary dinner. Her presence was crucial. She wasn't just an accessory, she was a pillar of David's support system. Her public humiliation was non-negotiable. I sent her a text, oozing with false sincerity. Hey Em. I know things were a little tense when you were over last, and I'm so sorry. I've been under so much stress. I'm coming back for the anniversary, and David and I would love it if you would join us for dinner. It would mean the world to us to have family there. Her reply was instant. OMG Oma, of course. I would love to. Can't wait to celebrate you two lovebirds. #couple goals. The hypocrisy was nauseating. The day of our anniversary arrived. I spent the afternoon at a salon, getting my hair and makeup done. I bought a new dress, a stunning, blood-red sheath that was both elegant and powerful. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't see a sick, frightened woman. I saw a warrior. I arrived at the restaurant a few minutes before the reservation. David was already there, waiting at the bar. When he saw me, his face lit up with that familiar, fake smile. He rushed over, pulling me into a hug. You look breathtaking, he whispered in my ear. I had to fight the urge to recoil. I just smiled, a cold, serene smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. You look pretty handsome yourself, I lied. Emily arrived shortly after, fluttering in a cloud of expensive perfume. She hugged me tightly. So happy you're back. We were all so worried about you. We were led to our private room, an intimate space with a single large table, dimly lit by a modern chandelier. It was perfect. A cage for the final act. We ordered a bottle of champagne, and David stood to make a toast. To my beautiful wife, Oma, he began, his voice smooth as silk. Happy 6th anniversary. These have been the best years of my life. I know you haven't been feeling yourself lately, but I want you to know I am here for you, through sickness and in health. I love you more than words can say. He clinked his glass against mine. The sound echoed in the silent room. I looked him dead in the eye, took a sip of the champagne, and smiled. I have a toast I'd like to make as well, I said, my voice clear and steady. But it can wait until after the main course. I have a little anniversary surprise for you both. David beamed, thinking I had brought him a gift. Emily clapped her hands in delight. They had no idea. The deception was complete. The trap was set. All they had to do now was wait for the jaws to spring shut. The dinner was a masterclass in surrealism. We ate seared scallops and filet mignon, making stilted conversation about work, the weather, and Emily's latest social media collaborations. I played the part of the loving, reconciled wife to perfection, laughing at David's jokes, asking Emily about her brand, all while a storm of righteous fury raged inside me. I watched the way David would place his hand on mine, the picture of doting affection, and all I could think of was that same hand adding drops of poison to my coffee. I saw the way Emily would smile at me, a sweet, sisterly smile, and all I could see was her standing next to Isabella, laughing, a willing accomplice to my destruction. They were so confident, so utterly secure in their deceit. They thought they were minutes away from pulling off the perfect crime, that this anniversary dinner was just another box to tick in their grand, malevolent plan. They had no idea they weren't the predators in this story anymore. They were the prey. Finally, the waiter cleared our main course plates. The moment had come. So, Emily chirped, leaning forward eagerly. What's this surprise you have for us? David looked at me, a smug, indulgent smile on his face. Yes, darling. Don't keep us in suspense. I reached into my purse and pulled out a sleek, white tablet. I placed it in the center of the table. It's more of a presentation, really, I said, my voice dropping the cheerful charade, settling into a low, calm register that immediately wiped the smiles off their faces. I've been working on a new project, and I'd love to get your feedback. I tapped the screen. The tablet came to life, and I turned it to face them. The first image that appeared was a high-definition still from the hidden camera footage. It was a perfect shot of David, his back to the camera, standing in our kitchen. His hand was reaching for the cabinet under the sink. David's face went white. Emily just looked confused. What is this? Why do you have a picture of David's back? Patience, Emily, I said coolly. I pressed play. The video began to roll, silent and damning. They watched, mesmerized in horror, as David pulled out the small, unlabeled bottle. They saw him unscrew the cap, lean over a pale blue ceramic mug, my mug, and carefully squeeze a few drops of clear liquid into it. They saw him go to the garage, top off the bottle from a large jug of antifreeze, and then return to pour the poisoned coffee down the drain. The room was utterly silent, save for the faint sound of clinking glasses from the main dining hall. Emily's jaw hung open, her eyes wide with disbelief. David was frozen, his skin the color of ash. He looked like he had seen a ghost. In a way, he had. The ghost of the woman he had failed to kill. That, he stammered, his voice a choked whisper. That can be faked. That's deep fake technology. Oma, what is this? What kind of sick joke is this? Oh, it's no joke, David, I said, my voice like ice. I swiped to the next file on the tablet. It was the preliminary toxicology report from Chloe's friend, with the words ethylene glycol, high concentration highlighted in red. I followed it with the official report from my doctor, showing the elevated creatinine levels, the diagnosis of acute renal stress due to nephrotoxin exposure. Emily let out a small gasp, her hand flying to her mouth. She looked from the tablet to her brother, her eyes searching for an explanation. David? What is this? Antifreeze? Is this real? David just stared at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of pure hatred and sheer terror. He had been so thoroughly, so completely outplayed. But wait, there's more, I said, mimicking the tone of a game show host. I swiped again. A picture of Isabella appeared on the screen, smiling on her balcony. Then another, of her and David laughing together at the vineyard. Then another, and another, a slideshow of their secret relationship, curated from Emily's and Isabella's own social media feeds. Isabella, I said, letting her name hang in the air. She's lovely. Ambitious. A perfect match for you, David. I can see the appeal. I swiped one last time. The screen now showed the forensic accountant's report, a detailed flowchart of stolen funds, moving from our joint accounts to the offshore corporation, with the final destination being a Cayman Islands bank account held in the names of David and Isabella. The account balance was displayed in bold, unforgiving numbers, $1.2 million. On top of the $1 million from my life insurance policy, they would have been set for life. The storage unit, the secret account, the new woman, it's quite the plan, I said, finally looking up from the tablet and meeting his terrified gaze. Methodical. Patient. You were going to let me get sick, to waste away, and you'd be there, the devoted husband, holding my hand until the very end. And then you'd collect the insurance money, liquidate our assets, and disappear with your new soulmate. It was almost perfect. David finally broke. You crazy witch, he hissed, his voice trembling with rage. You set me up. No, David, I said, standing up, my voice ringing with a power I never knew I possessed. You set yourself up. You just never thought I'd be the one to spring the trap. I turned to Emily, whose face was stained with tears. And you, I said, my voice dripping with contempt. You knew. You stood by and watched him flaunt his mistress in my face. You smiled and took pictures, all while knowing what he was. You are just as guilty as he is. Emily started sobbing, incoherent denials tumbling from her lips. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know he was poisoning you. I just thought. I thought he was unhappy. Her pathetic excuses were drowned out as I stood to deliver my final toast. I picked up my still full glass of champagne. David and Emily flinched, as if they expected me to throw it in their faces. But I was done with theatrics. This was about cold, hard consequences. I'd like to make my toast now, I announced, my voice cutting through the silence. A toast to betrayal. To greed. And to underestimating the woman you share a bed with. I looked directly at David. May you get everything you deserve. I didn't drink. I simply placed the glass back on the table. And then, as if on cue, the door to the private room swung open. 2 uniformed police officers stepped inside, followed by a stone-faced Detective Miller and my lawyer. David's face crumbled. The last vestiges of his arrogance and control evaporated, replaced by the primal fear of a cornered animal. He looked from the police to me, his eyes wide with the horrifying realization that this was not a marital spat. This was the end of his life as he knew it. David, I said, my voice calm and final. I believe these gentlemen are here for you. The immediate aftermath was a blur of controlled chaos. The restaurant staff, sensing the gravity of the situation, had discreetly cleared the surrounding area. The other diners were none the wiser. My revenge had been a surgical strike, executed in the quiet, soundproofed privacy of a room meant for celebration. David didn't rage or fight. His mind, which was so adept at calculating financial markets, was now rapidly processing the totality of his ruin. He seemed to shrink in his expensive suit as the officers handcuffed him. He didn't look at me again. He couldn't. His final act in our marriage was one of utter and complete cowardice. As they led him away, his shoulders slumped in defeat, I felt not a shred of pity. Just a vast, empty sense of relief. Emily was another story. She was hysterical, her carefully constructed world of hashtags and filters dissolving into a puddle of mascara-stained tears and frantic denials. She wasn't arrested that night, but Detective Miller made it clear she was a person of interest in the investigation. Her complicity, her willful blindness to her brother's affair and financial crimes, had made her an accomplice in the eyes of the law. She would be questioned, her finances would be scrutinized, and her life would be irrevocably tarnished. As she stumbled out of the restaurant, sobbing into her phone, I knew her social media feed was about to get a lot less glamorous. Her reputation, the only currency she truly valued, was bankrupt. My lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Ms. Davies, handled everything with brisk efficiency. She handed over the tablet, the hard drives with the video evidence, and the forensic accountant's report to Detective Miller. "This should be everything you need for an open and shut case," she said. The detective looked at me with a newfound respect. "In 20 years on the force," he said, shaking his head slightly, "I've never seen a victim hand us a case so perfectly gift-wrapped. You did our job for us." "He was my husband," I replied, my voice devoid of emotion. I knew how he thought. I just used his own logic against him. Leaving the restaurant and stepping into the cool night air felt like taking my first breath after nearly drowning. Chloe was waiting for me by her car, her face a mixture of anxiety and fierce pride. She didn't say a word, just opened her arms and held me as I finally let the tension of the past few weeks wash away. I didn't cry. I was done with tears. The legal battle was swift and brutal for David. Faced with the irrefutable video evidence, the financial trail, and my medical reports, he had no defense. His high-priced lawyers advised him to take a plea deal. He pleaded guilty to attempted murder and several counts of wire fraud. He was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. Isabella, implicated in the financial crimes, also faced charges. She lost her job, her reputation, and was sentenced to 5 years for her role in the conspiracy. The offshore account was frozen and, after a lengthy legal process, the stolen funds were returned to me. The divorce was the easiest part. He signed the papers from his prison cell, relinquishing all claims to our assets. I sold the house, that beautiful, magazine-perfect cage of lies. I couldn't stand to be in it another minute. I sold the furniture, the appliances, and anything else that reminded me of him. I took only my clothes, my books, and the pale blue coffee mug. It sat on my new kitchen counter, a stark reminder not of the poison it once held, but of the intuition that had saved my life. The story, of course, leaked to the press. Poison plot, financier husband tries to kill wife with antifreeze. It was sensational, a modern-day film noir plot played out in the quiet suburbs. For a few weeks, my name was everywhere. But I refused to be defined by it. I changed my number, took a sabbatical from work, and focused on healing. My health returned. My kidneys, thankfully, made a full recovery. The physical scars faded, but the emotional ones ran deeper. Learning to trust again would be a long and difficult road. But for the first time in years, I felt truly free. I was no longer living under the subtle, suffocating weight of David's control and deception. I was the master of my own life, the author of my own story. I started small. I took a pottery class, something I had always wanted to do. I reconnected with old friends. I traveled, not to fancy resorts, but to quiet, beautiful places that nourished my soul. I found joy in the simple things, the the smell of rain on hot pavement, the taste of a truly good cup of coffee, brewed by my own hands, and the unconditional, unwavering support of a true friend like Chloe. Life is different now. It's quieter, simpler, and infinitely more authentic. The trauma of David's betrayal will always be a part of my history, a dark chapter in my life's book. But it is not the whole story. It is merely the prologue to a new, more resilient chapter, one of strength, survival, and the quiet, unshakable power of a woman who refused to be erased. The first light of my new dawn was breaking, and the future, for the first time in a long time, was entirely my own.